Welcome, everybody, to a new project that Kim and I will be doing for the next few weeks. We will be trying to expose you guys to a channel. We're sure you're not watching because we've seen the views on these videos, but you all should be watching it. If you like gig news, if you like hearing a little tidbits of it, these guys do a podcast every week. They drop it on Friday, and we will be doing a reaction video to their video because they cover 3 topics every week, and they're always worth it. They stay underneath 20 minutes. And we want to really help them get exposure because this should be the, how do we say it, Kim, the digital card in your
Yeah, I always say with legal rideshare, like every single driver should have them saved in their contacts. Like we'll put their number and all their information in the description of this live, but everybody should have it saved in their phone because you never know when you're gonna need it. And I think it's really important that every driver does.
Yeah, and we'll have more to say in the upcoming weeks about it too, but just so you guys are aware, like anything ever happens to you, like if you're ever doing gig work and you're in an accident or whatever, there's even a funny video up on their channel that you guys can go find about, are we ambulance chasers? Where they say they're not. So it's kind of funny that they actually know this, but here's the thing. They know more about gig law than anybody else in this country. Other gig lawyers go to them. So, I mean, they have the network, they have the ability. But if you're in an accident and it wasn't your fault, it was your fault, whatever, this is who you call. If you're a passenger, if you're a driver, if you're on an e-scooter, it doesn't matter. This is who you call. Should be your first call.
And I don't even know we said it. By the way, guys, it's legal rideshare. I don't even know whether we actually even said that's the channel we're going to be doing, but it's legal rideshare. Everybody, it should be a household name at this point.
And many of you might have already heard about it and you're going, oh, I already know about them. But did you know they do the podcast? Because they do it on audio and on video. And I don't think many people do. And I think that's what Kim and I are going to try and help get them some exposure. So go over, give them a view, give them a like, give them a comment, ask them a question. They're great. They're great. They're professional and they're great people to know too. I mean, This is a great contact to have. So without further ado, should we jump into this episode from this week?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, here we go. Stage.
Ladies and gentlemen, drivers, gig workers, and everyone in between, welcome to This Week in Rideshare podcast. I am your host, Jared Hoffa. It is Friday, July 19th, and this week, drivers fight back, data tells all, and Uber gives insights. Legal Rideshare breaks it down. And of course, from Legal Rideshare, I'm joined by the co-founder and lead attorney, Bryant Greening. Bryant, happy Friday.
Happy Friday, Jared. Great to be back.
It is. I don't know if you watched The Boys. I'm feeling a little bit like Butcher today. I got the Hawaiian shirt and the beard. Have you seen that show?
You know, I'm not a viewer of that show, but I can definitely tell that you look like that guy. You know?
Yeah, I'm channeling it, which is good. It's a nice summer day in Chicago. It's actually quite nice, so why not, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's enjoy this summer.
Exactly. And actually, the first story we have today, we'll jump right into it, is Chicago-based, and this is drivers fighting back. So Chicago rideshare drivers are fighting back against deactivations. And this is reported from Capital and Maine, and they explain, quote, Chicago rideshare drivers gathered between the first and second terminals of the O'Hare International Airport on June 25th to launch their latest call for change. What they are saying is an end to unfair deactivations. Chicago rideshare drivers have already been pushing for the passage of Chicago Rideshare Living Wage and Safety Ordinance, also known as the Fair Share Ordinance, that was introduced last year. Now, that legislation would raise drivers' pay, give them 2 weeks' notice before deactivation, and require Uber and Lyft to share deactivation details with city regulators and drivers, among other regulations. They do go into detail and say last week's demonstration linked the Chicago effort to actually a national campaign protesting deactivations from Activate Respect, which is coordinated by the Chicago Gig Alliance, which supports area workers in food delivery, rideshare, and other industries, plus Gig Workers Rising, a California-based organization advocating for app-based workers. Organizers estimated that about 100 drivers demonstrated between Chicago, Denver, and San Jose. So, Brian, this is nothing new. We obviously know how bad this is, but there's really becoming almost an organized national movement, which is really great.
It really is. It's so important that drivers are banding together to try to solve this problem. Deactivations have been one of the biggest issues in the rideshare community for as long as I can remember. You know, we've been part of this community for a decade now, and this is something that drivers have continually dealt with. There's so little transparency. Drivers can be deactivated for really any reason, on a whim, without notice, without any due process. And it's just not fair. We've said time and time again, look, there are times when drivers need to be deactivated, when there's a safety issue that can be established, when there's repetitive issues with customers. We get it. But 9 times out of 10, it seems that drivers are being deactivated without a reasonable cause, without being notified of their behavior that is at issue, and without an opportunity to defend themselves. All we're asking for is fairness, due process, and some standards. We need to know what gets you deactivated, what if there's some complaint that's being made, give a warning, give an opportunity for a driver to change the behavior rather than taking away a job. And when the deactivation comes, there needs to be some sort of hearing. There needs to be an opportunity to hear the driver's side of the story rather than just taking the passenger at their word. And if it's proven that the driver needs to be removed, then so be it. But let's do this in a fair, responsible way.
Yeah, and if you go into the article, just like you said about the kind of the transparency and having some sort of fair response or just a way to counter it, the article really does go into. They cover a few drivers who've been deactivated. One of them, his name was Moses. He was deactivated for quote unquote what they said is the passenger felt uncomfortable. So he said, well, okay. So he reached out to the company. I believe it was Uber, and they're like, well, we can't give you any info. So he's like, well, what did I do that was so uncomfortable? And then, of course, in response to the article, Uber said, hey, the driver can reach out to us and call anytime. And then he rebutted and said, every time I try to reach out, there's no one that answers. It's a zero-sum game. You just can't win if that's what you're dealing with.
Right, and so there's so many problems with that driver's experience. So the passenger feels uncomfortable. Okay, that's a problem. Drivers shouldn't make passengers feel uncomfortable, but there needs to be more information about why and how can we improve this driver's behavior. Maybe there was some cultural difference where the passenger was uncertain of the driver's behavior, but the driver thought that he was acting in an appropriate manner, and just a little bit of communication can go a long way, and we can solve a lot of these problems. There's not a reason that a driver needs to lose their job based on a complaint like that. Now, if the complaint is I felt uncomfortable because the driver was reaching back and trying to touch me, that's a different story. That driver probably should be deactivated, but
right.
We need to know what the facts are. The driver needs to know what the allegation is. And if it's something that can be corrected with a talking to, let's correct it with a talking to. If it's something that needs to be taken more seriously, at least give the driver an opportunity to know the allegations against them, to have an opportunity to present their side of the story, and to have a fair, neutral person come in and say, okay, this is the outcome. It shouldn't just all be the passenger and the company making these decisions without the driver's input or opportunity to defend themselves.
Absolutely. And again, it's it's hard to fight something that you have no idea what's going on. So I couldn't have said it better myself. So we'll head on to the second story.
Okay, so before we head on to the second story, Kim, what are your thoughts?
I liked that they were giving a lot of facts behind what exactly is happening in Chicago, especially from a lawyer's perspective. I agree with everything that they said. A lot of these companies, they deactivate first, and ask questions later, or it takes them months to investigate what happened, opposed to just flat out asking the driver, or if it's rideshare or whether it's food delivery, like they should just ask the driver first and foremost what happened in this situation and then make their decision. Like that's not the case. Like they always take the side of the customer, and we know customers lie nonstop in order to get what they want out of
Yeah.
it, whether it's a
Yeah.
eh,
Customers would rather those that do it wrongfully would rather get a free ride, even if it means you lose your work.
yeah. And it's so wrong on so many different levels. And I I think that's one of the things, and I think we even talked about this even last year when we were in Colorado with Stephanie with Deactivations, is, you know, it's nice that people are listening, that there does have to be something that can be done. Now, whether this can be a national wide movement, whether it's your own individual city or town movement, that's to, I guess the future of the gig economy, and legislation. But I definitely think something needs to be done with these companies who just think they can deactivate just to deactivate.
Yeah, and that goes, guys. That I mean, even though legal rideshare, anything that you're doing gig wise, again, if you're hurt, give them a call, absolutely. But they really have kind of fine tuned the delivery space. But I would say this applies as much to the delivery people
Oh,
as
absolutely.
rideshare. I mean, because there's so many people calling in a no cause or making up a cause of why they need to complain, and I want a free meal. I don't want to pay for that. Well, it's going to cost that guy's job. I don't care. And it's not like they know. Maybe many of them don't know that. However, I'm sure they have some inkling that the driver gets in some sort of trouble.
I don't honestly think customers care, right? I think what's in it for me at the moment. Sorry, I'm going to get free food, or I'm going to get a free ride, or like I'm going to get something. So I'm getting something myself for free. I don't care what the consequences are, if there is any consequences.
Yeah. And then the last thing I would at least note on is that I like that Brian was saying, like, listen, you got to, provide a reason or whatever. But he did sidestep to something that I believe majorly in, like it kind of tied my brain anyway to minors. And when he said that, hey, listen, if you're accused sexually of something, that could be a different story, maybe. But I still think you have to, you're innocent till proven guilty. So
Yeah.
you do, but I agree with Bryant that if that's the allegation and it's real, because obviously that's going to involve police and everything. So somebody probably wouldn't make that for a free ride, but whatever their reason is, I do agree. Maybe there needs to be a pause on the driver there, because until they figure out what's going on.
Yeah. We talked also about this a couple of days ago with, the like you're looking at the identifying verification, identity
Mhm.
verification. I couldn't get that out. But when you're looking at that, like it could take a couple minutes. It could sometimes even take up to 24 hours. So why not just like put a pause for half a second, investigate what's going on, and make your determination based on your findings, opposed to just pulling the trigger right away.
Yeah. I mean, something needs to be done about this. We all know this. This is becoming more commonplace than ever. And like Kim was saying a year ago, like she was referencing a year ago, we were complaining about this, but it's 3 times worse now on all
Yeah.
platforms.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to the second part here and see what it is. By the way, guys, this is a reaction video. Kim and I have not watched it, even though I am wearing a Hawaiian shirt. I don't know how that happened. I know that seems a little suspicious, but at least
But I
wanted to
don't
mention it.
know the
I thought it
show
was
he's
funny.
talking about. I feel like I'm out of it. I don't know the
Oh,
show
it's
he
a
was
it's
talking
a
about.
it's a Prime show. It's a show on Prime. It's like about it's like a very graphic comic book.
Oh, is that like superhero thing
Yeah,
where
but it's
I think I
it's
saw like
pretty
the first
dark.
season of
Yeah,
it. Got it.
it's pretty dark. So here we will move into second part here, see what they're talking about in this part.
Here, new data reveals the impact of New York City's new minimum wage law. This is from GeekWire, and they reported, quote, delivery drivers working for platforms such as DoorDash and Uber Eats in New York City saw wages grow more than $7 per hour following implementation of a new minimum wage law, according to the report shared by city officials. The report said that while pay per hour increased substantially, tips per hour fell 60% year over year. The company changed tipping mechanisms within their apps after the law went into effect. Now, they have some other takeaways from the report. The number of total workers fell by 9% year over year. Total consumer spending rose by 10% to $108 million. Fees paid by consumers rose to an average of $20.1 million per week, or a 58% year over year increase. Interesting study, but from what I understand here, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, the argument was if you increase it, people aren't going to spend money. It doesn't seem like that's the case.
It doesn't seem like the rideshare companies' arguments have panned out. They were saying that if you increase the hours, or I'm sorry, the money that drivers make per hour, there's going to be less demand. Fees are going to go up so high that customers don't want to use the product, and that's just not what we're seeing. We're seeing that drivers are earning more per hour. That's great. We're seeing that customers are spending more than they were before. It seems to be increased demand. So I think that we're showing that paying drivers a livable wage, allowing them to earn a respectable income and keep a roof over their head, doesn't have any effect on the business model, other than just allowing drivers to have a job that appropriately pays them. So, I love seeing the statistics that drivers are making more, and I love seeing the statistics that customers aren't abandoning the apps. This should be a case study for other markets who are considering minimum wage laws and showing that it's just not having the negative effects that the companies claim that it will. Now, the tipping is an interesting component of it. To hear that drivers' tips have gone down. At the end of the day, I would rather know that I'm going to be making a certain level of income rather than relying on tips, which can be variable anyway. So I think that it's kind of like you want to know what the money is that's going to be coming to you. You want to know what your bottom line is and not rely on that variable income anyway. So I'm not overly concerned about that. Obviously, we're rooting for people to tip more, but the minimum wage, I think, is more important.
Yeah, you bring up a good point about that. I wanted to talk about that too. And really, there's two components to the tips. So it says tips per hour fell 60% year over year. But there's two things here. I think one, they don't actually go into detail of how much the tip was, right, per average. So I imagine the tips are still lower than the money that they're getting for the increase. And the second thing is the companies changed the tipping mechanism when the law went into effect. So they instantly made it harder. So I'm not shocked that the response was, well, people don't even know where to tip or if they need to tip. But like you said, I think it's much better for drivers to have the consistency than say, hey, I might get tipped.
Right. And I think your point is really a good one about the companies changing the tipping mechanism. Perhaps tips would go down some as the fares are going up. But in the same vein, if the passengers can't find the tip button, well, that's going to explain at least some of that decrease in tipping. So if the companies make tipping easier, you have to think that figure that we're looking at, it wouldn't be quite as dramatic as it is.
Right. Yeah. It'd be interesting to watch this and see how this progresses over time. But interesting study for sure. And on to our final story here.
Okay, Steve, what do you think?
Look, there's actually a lot to unpack here because I mean, here's the deal. I don't know what the oversaturation issue is. I believe that some of the one thing I fully agree wholeheartedly, change is needed. I don't know if they're finally suffering, the companies are finally suffering the problem of the oversaturation being the problem that it is, because I know drivers in New York who are really having a hard time scheduling blocks. And now you have to schedule blocks. You can't just turn on the app and go. And as you know, with Uber Eats, Kim, like with DoorDash, for example, they do their tiers, this, that, the other, the ability to dash now, but Uber Eats allows you to go on anytime you want, anybody. But Uber used to be that way too. So my concern is, and then we also talking about New York City, and New York City is much different than any other city there is, because people are going to use rideshare. They're just gonna, period.
Yeah.
But the fact that people, I understand, and I think that we need to find a way to desaturate, but I'm not sure that boxing people out, and like we were talking about last night, locking people out of their abilities and or giving them a block and then saying you're not needed when they're counting on that block because now they only have to schedule their blocks. I think it really comes down to, my issue with this is the saturation problem, because until that's fixed, I don't know, maybe this is helping some drivers, but I don't know if it's helping all of them.
Yeah, there's a couple things, and you're gonna have to correct me if I'm wrong because I'm trying to go back in my memory, and sometimes I get Seattle and New York City confused. So New York City was the one who was tipping after, correct? Was the city that was testing tipping after?
Yeah. Where you,
So
even with the food platforms, yes.
right. So if that's the case, well, that's the problem on why customers aren't tipping as much as they used to. Because, first of all, I'm going to assume that DoorDash, Uber Eats, Uber, all of these companies raised these customer fees, and they're raising it to offset what they're paying the drivers. But at the same time, as a customer, if I'm tipping after and it's an afterthought, well, I just paid this ridiculous amount of fees. There's no option to really tip the driver or the delivery person. Why would I? So I can understand how there is a big difference. Is that concerned? I agree, because this is the thing, and I don't think it was even mentioned, and if I remember correctly, it was $1 per hour based off of active time, not the time that you're actually on the platform. Am I
Well,
remembering that correctly?
yeah, but not with the rideshare. With rideshare, you're
Okay.
actually getting the time on platform. This is why they went to those blocks. This is why
Got it.
everybody's gotten boxed out. I mean, again, it's a different solution, and I'm all for that. I think desaturation needs to be the focus. This is my personal view. I mean, I think it will get us. I think that would get us to the point, if it were done properly, that the legal rideshare team, that you and I, that we're all trying to get to
Yeah.
in the best way, is just to really dig in there, and instead of regulating everything on everybody, maybe dig in there and get after these companies about how many drivers do you have on. Taxi companies used to do this back in the day. They used to have a limit on how many they could have out in a city on any given night.
If you really think about it, and this goes back to what we talked about last night, if they actually did quote unquote crack down on these shared accounts, would that solve all of our oversaturation problems? And then some of the drivers would be even making more money because they can get onto blocks, they can make an actual hourly wage, and everything's kind of right on the world again. So I think it starts with these companies and really figuring out what's really going on and how to solve some of the problems that they're having.
Yeah, I mean, yes. And the last thing that I would note too about the tipping is that when they remove that tipping feature till after the fact, first of all, I know from years of doing this, it's tough to get a rideshare tip sometimes through the app. It's a little bit different than delivery, but one thing I would say is that the reason they did that is because, like I said, in New York City, people are going to take these rides anywhere, and so they might look at Lyft and Uber and go, okay, Lyft's a little cheaper, I'll do that one. But when you look at your bill at the end of a month, and if you're taking these every day, you're going to start adding it all up and going, wow, I'm spending a lot more on Lyft and Uber. But if they've now hidden the ability, making it very difficult to tip, it's going to appear a little less, when really it's the companies taking all that extra money.
Yeah,
And
it
it's
is.
not going to the drivers.
No.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a big problem too. Again, I think look, transparency, and start solving the oversaturation. You can't have 10,000 people in a market on a platform that think they have the ability to earn if only 1,000 do.
Agreed.
That's something that needs to be handled. So, but again, I mean, with these guys, everybody check out Legal Rideshare. They're on YouTube. We will put all the information in the video notes below, but make sure to give them a check out, because every week they're doing these kind of videos. Last week's was another good one. They talked about the reality of autonomous. But we'll jump into this last segment here, and we'll see what they're talking about.
Uber rolls out a new feature. This is from The Verge, and they explain, quote, Uber rolled out a new update that lets users search average fares and wait times for planned trips in other cities. The company said it wants to give people who are planning trips or vacations more visibility into how much it would cost to book Uber rides when they get there. The update gives people access to fare and wait time details in approximately 10,000 cities globally, Uber says. The change will start rolling out this week. It did on Tuesday, July 16th. Uber said it wants to take the guesswork out of travel, especially with millions of people expected to make the trip, let's say, to Paris for the Olympics. Now, I find this very interesting, as they often talk out of both sides of their mouth. They seem to be okay with giving transparency for the passenger, but not the driver. Interesting.
It is. I noticed the same thing. I first of all, I think that this is a great idea. I love the transparency. I love putting the information out there so people can make good decisions about how they want to travel around a city that they're not familiar with. Using Paris as an example, perhaps for some families it makes sense to rent a car rather than Uber everywhere, because the wait times might be higher than they want, or the costs might be higher, and or vice versa. Maybe renting a car would be more expensive, and this just allows them the information that they need to make the decision that's right for them. To your point, I think the drivers could also benefit greatly from an increase in transparency, whether it be in terms of the wages, what to expect in terms of a fare, deactivations like we talked about earlier. Uber seems to prioritize, as you mentioned, transparency for one group of people and make it anything but transparent for the other. So when we hear stories about Uber understanding the importance of transparency, it is a bit ironic given the stances that they've taken on many other issues.
Yeah, it's funny. We both thought the same thing, and it's hard not to see it. And I also just find it really interesting that it'll often be in the same news story the same week that Uber will say we can't do that, and then like you said, for one group of people they're like, oh yeah, of course we'll do that. That's what we do. Yeah, and I agree with you though. I do think ultimately, I think it's great for the passengers to know that. I think it's smart. I think just ultimately transparency in general is ideal. As we talk about all the time, it would stop a lot of these issues. And every time that we do get the data, as we just saw with the previous story, it kind of sheds light on this sort of ending this sort of boogeyman, you don't know, we know better thing. When you get the data, when you get the numbers, when you get the transparency, both passengers and drivers can make decisions that are responsible and make sense. And then maybe people aren't so angry. Maybe things aren't escalating. So I think all around it's important.
Well, I think one of the reasons why Uber prioritizes transparency for the passenger is they view the passenger as their customer. They want to be seen as the friendly, and here's all the information that you're going to need to make a good decision for you, and that all makes sense from a customer service perspective. But Uber, in a lot of ways, views the driver as their enemy. It's the group that's taking away money from their pot. And I think that the reason why a lot of times they're not transparent with drivers is because the data isn't all that good for drivers. They don't want drivers to know just how much money Uber is getting and how little money the driver is getting, or exactly what the information is that they're relying on when deactivating a driver. Sometimes it's easier to just remove a driver from the platform rather than to have a full discussion or hearing about an issue. So there's a reason why there's a lack of transparency with the drivers, and it's because Uber knows that the information that they're keeping from the drivers would probably piss the drivers off if they knew. That's the bottom line. They understand that the data isn't in the driver's favor, so they're shielding them from it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it's easier to control it that way, and we've obviously seen that in previous stories, previous legislation, you name it. They're quite good at that. But those are stories for this week. So before we head off into the weekend, of course, Brian, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, just before the weekend begins, we always remind everybody that if you're involved in an accident or suffer an injury involving an Uber, Lyft, whether you're a driver, passenger, victim, you can come to Legal Rideshare. We offer free consultations. We provide all the information that you need to ensure that you're getting a solid foundation for your insurance claim, having an opportunity to collect every single dime that you're entitled to, whether it's medical bills, lost wages, pain and suffering, any damage that you sustain. Time is always of the essence. Claims don't get better with time, so please come to us early. You can find all of our contact information at legalrideshare.com.
So Kim, what do you think about this last topic?
Wow. So first of all, I love that these guys are so informative and have really good opinions on what's happening, not just the rideshare space. I think any delivery space that involves any gig work, which I think is absolutely fantastic, which is why I actually enjoy watching this on Fridays. But, the one thing that really stood out was when Brian was saying about the drivers being the enemy and actually taking money away from the company with transparent, like, to me, like, that just completely hit home for me. I'm like, you got that right. So I really enjoyed what he said there. I do. I think that if they could be transparent with everybody, our world would be a better place and we wouldn't be sitting here right now talking about this very same topic. But, it really is about the customer and for them to appear to be this fantastic company. And we're doing so much for the customer.
Yeah.
Who cares about the driver?
No, 100%. And I mean, obviously, for those that don't know, these guys have been in business for a long time. I knew both of them, Bryant and Jared, back in 2018. So I've known that. I mean, pre-pandemic, I was already talking with them. They were one of my first podcast guests, like episode 20, when I started that in 2020. But I had already been talking to them about different cases and sending people their way. They are the most knowledgeable in the country. And to your point, Bryant has obviously he goes and litigates these. So he obviously has seen the much dirtier and nastier than we even know, because he's been in court dealing with this crap. So he's actually probably seen the nastiest of this. And so as mad as we get, imagine how mad he gets dealing with clients who deserve better. And, basically every time, probably the same old case. Let's just try and not pay anything. Let's try and not help this driver out. Let's do this. And then these guys are sitting here trying to work it for you. They're even talking about lost wages. We're not employees, and they find ways to get lost wages. So you guys make sure to check them out. Legal Rideshare. You can find them at legalrideshare.com. You can request a free consultation at help@legalrideshare.com. You can find them on YouTube at legalrideshare.com. Free consultations. They will talk to you. They have no problem doing it. Again, I've known Bryant for a long time. Kim knows him too. And these are just solid people who are just trying to help.
And right now, right from watching this, you need to go over. We're going to link it in the description of this live right now. Go check out their channel. Go check out the live that we just showed. Give them a thumbs up. Give them a comment saying, I just watched Kim and Steve. They sent me over, whatever you want to do. But, go help out their channel as much as you guys love us, because we love them
and
too.
if you're on the fly and you're going to watch it next week, or we want you to go over and check them out, because more people should be watching these than the views that they have. That's what we're really trying to get everybody to know. This name, this should be branded. But leave a comment in Kim's video or in mine too. We'll make sure that that's passed along to them. Anything at all, just get involved, but definitely subscribe and check them out, because they're not posting a lot of videos. You're not going to be bogged down. They post one a week. It's This Week in Rideshare, but it can apply to a lot of things. So they're the ones out there to help you. Not many other people are doing that this well. So Legal Rideshare, you guys. And Kim and I will be back next week to do another breakdown of Legal Rideshare and This Week in their podcast, audio podcast as well. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you back here next week.